Okay, now the spokes are all cut and threaded, so it's time to prepare them for lacing them into the hub and onto the rim. Now, because the holes in these electric motor hubs are big, they're 3.2 millimeters instead of about 2.5 is more normal, and these spokes that I'm using are only 2 mil spokes. That's the normal standard size for a spoke. These are just parallel plain gauge spokes. That's the best way. Plain gauge spokes, you can always cut them to length. Now, because that 2 mil spoke rattles around a bit in the 3.2 millimeter hole, I'll show you over here. When we put a spoke through a hole, you can see there's a bit of, it can move back and forth. Even when I pull it right in, there's quite a big space in there between the spoke and the flange. You don't want that. Flexing at that elbow is what makes spokes break a lot of the time. So we want to pack out that head, the head of that spoke, the nipple, no, not the nipple, the head, with a little brass washer. So I've got these beautiful little brass washers here, and I'll just get one on, slip it down there. So when that goes on, that will just tighten up the way that the head of that spoke sits in the hole. The other thing I like to do is put just a little smear of waterproof grease on the thread, because this is waterproof boat grease. It's very durable and is unlikely to get washed off, and it just means you're less likely to have the nipples freeze on the thread, which does often happen to older wheels. So I'm hoping that will keep the nipple easily adjusted for truing the wheel in the future. Okay, now we have all the spokes prepared. It's time to start lacing up the wheel. So I strongly recommend everyone read Sheldon Brown's page on wheel building. It's really excellent. That's where I learnt to lace. So we're pretty much following his method. So what I'm going to do is I'll start by dropping in a spoke into every second spoke hole on the left side of the wheel. So you see, this is the side opposite from where the chain and sprockets are, the non-drive side. And notice that I'm putting the spokes in from the outside of the flange in towards the inside. Now when I come all the way round, there's still a space here, so it means I haven't missed one. That's a good thing about lacing wheels. There's always a pattern that helps you work out whether you've made a mistake, and you do make mistakes. Now the first spoke to go into the rim is what Sheldon Brown calls the key spoke. I've just chosen this one. It can be any spoke. And it's going to go, this is important, just to the left, looking from this side, of the valve hole. You can see the valve hole there. Now I'm just going to put a nipple on there a few turns. So now we need to have a look at how that spoke and hub sit in the rim. Now all these spokes that we put in from the outside of the flange on this side, and it'll be the same pattern on the other side, that we'll put the first spokes we put on the other side will be coming in from the outside, and so they'll be inside spokes. You can imagine that when the motor or the sprockets with chain tension twist the hub, it'll turn it round this way. And so you can see that spoke is a pulling spoke. Now if you look at the valve hole there, because the spoke is bending that way, it's bending away from the valve hole. So that means you'll be able to get your pump chuck onto the valve and pump your tyres up. It's a purely practical thing. If you have a spoke crossing over in front of the valve, it's hard to pump the tyres up. So your valve hole is where you judge the first spoke going. Now, once you've got that one in, it's from here on it's following a pattern. Let's see if I can put this down without bending spokes. So, each spoke goes into the rim. Now see how the holes in the rim go left, right, left, right. So of course we've chosen a hole on the left for this spoke on the left hand side of the hub. So the next spoke will also be on the left, and we're going to skip 3 holes and put this spoke in here. Okay, so here we are, all the spokes are in, and you can see that hub's going to twist around this way when you pedal, and that's going to bend those spokes that way. So all of these spokes on the inside of the flange are pulling spokes. And now every time you get a ring of spokes completed, you have a look and see if you've got a problem with the pattern. Each spoke is going into a hole on the same side of the rim, and there's the same number of empty holes in between them. Okay, so now we're going to tip it over and do the same on the other side. Now, again, we're going to choose the second key spoke here. Now, have a look over here. That's our key spoke that's next to the valve hole. The next spoke we put in needs to be the one adjacent to that, away from the valve hole. So the second key spoke, which is on the opposite side of the first key spoke, is the next spoke away from the valve hole. And it's going to go into the next hole in the flange, in the hub, away from the keyhole. So when I look down from here, it goes in there. So once I've got that one in, I can just drop spokes in every second hole all the way round. Now here we are, we've got all the pulling spokes on the right hand side of the rim, the drive side where the chain, and this is where the cluster will spin on. And so you can imagine when the chain's being pushed by your legs, it's going to pull the hub around this way, and these spokes are going to be pulling the rim around. And you can see they're pulling the spokes adjacent to the valve hole away from the valve hole. So have a quick check around there. You can see there's 2 empty holes in between every pair of pulling spokes. And so now it's time to start lacing in you could call them pushing spokes, I suppose, the ones that go in all the holes that we've got left, and they will cross over these spokes and balance the wheel up. So I'll start dropping them in. So notice that these ones are going in from the inside of the flanges. Now that means that these spokes, when they get pulled out and you need to bend them round, they're not going to run into any other spokes. So you can't put these spokes in first. These spokes have to go in second, especially on wheels where you have multiple crossing. Now this wheel's only got 1 cross. That means the spokes will only cross over each other, or each spoke will only cross over one other spoke. So let's go up to the valve hole again. So this spoke here, it has to cross over one spoke because it's a one cross wheel. That's what we did our calculations on. And it has to go in a hole that's on this left-hand side of the rim, so that hole is. And it also has to go next to a spoke that's from the other side of the hub, if that makes any sense. Because remember, the spokes have to alternate left, right, left, right. So this spoke's from the left side, this spoke's from the right side of the hub. This spoke's from the left side of the hub. So I can see that that's going to work out okay. You have to just keep checking the pattern of how you're working to find out if you're making a mistake. And once we've got this spoke in, excuse me, once this spoke's in, then we know we've got the pattern set, and that's going to be fairly easy to do the whole wheel. Now have a look at this little tool. It's pretty much a screwdriver, a homemade screwdriver with a little nipple left in the middle of it. So that little nipple goes into the hole in the nipple and locates it there and makes it very easy to spin up the spokes before the spoke gets up to the end of the nipple. So very useful tool. You could make one of them out of an old screwdriver. So now I'm just going to go around and keep doing the same thing. Crossing the spokes over once. Now things look pretty floppy now because there's no tension on the spokes. There's a lot of change to happen yet to the shape of this wheel. Whoops. Okay, that's got all the pushing spokes in on the left side. So now we'll do the same for the right side. I'll just drop all the spokes in here. Now you can see now, if you did the inside spokes, if you did the outside spokes first, you'd have a devil's time trying to get the spokes into place, because when we turn this over, you can see it's very easy to go from that position to that position. You're not having to cross over all the other crossed spokes. So now there's no question of which hole these spokes go into. There's only, if we cross over once, there's only one hole available for them. So we can't make any mistakes anymore. So we'll just put all the nipples in onto these spokes. And in a moment we'll be starting to tension. So here we are, the wheel's all laced, but it's very floppy. And so now it's time to put it, I just heard a nipple fall out, put it into place and start truing. Now this is a relatively cheap truing stand, and it's just been fine. Doesn't have any dials or micrometers. Come around here and have a look at that. There's just a finger here that you can adjust. It's a Park made in America with all American threads. But it's a really helpful way of holding the wheel. It's actually not too bad already, but it's got a long way to go tightening these up. So we'll start tightening up the nipples now. Okay, we just go round the wheel using the little screwdriver with the nipple on each nipple from the outside to tighten it up until the little nipple on the screwdriver runs into the end of the spoke. Just gets you take up a lot of that first slack in each spoke very quickly. Sometimes I do use a electric drill with a flat blade bit in it, but that's hard to keep on the nipple. when you're doing this, you use the valve hole in the rim as a marking point. So I started doing the tightening of the spokes at the valve hole. I'm spinning the rim in the direction of the arrow that's on the hub, which you can't see from this side. The freewheeling direction of the hub makes it easier. It doesn't try and spin the axle in the jig. So we'll just go around and tighten all these up, and then we'll see what sort of position the rim is on the wheel. Okay, so just by tightening up the spokes all the same amount with the screwdriver, you can see it's actually surprisingly close. So that shows that we're not too way out and buckled. The spokes are still quite soft, but have a look down here at the little measuring finger, and what we want is for the rim to be right in the middle of the axle at the nuts up here. So I'll lift the wheel out of the jig, put it back in so I can see how far off centre it is, and you can see I have to bring this back. So clearly the rim needs to be pulled over to the right hand side, to the chain side, and so we'll do that as we adjust. As well as having the rim true side to side, even more important at the beginning is having the wheel round, so it's the same radius all the way round. And you can get big bumps in it that you want to take out first, but you can see here by that gap the bump's only small, so we'll pull that out by tightening up the spokes in that area. To get the rim to the right position left and right, I've lined up the valve hole with the finger on the jig, and now I'm going to tip the wheel out, turn the wheel opposite, spin it round, put it back, make sure it's properly seated in the V's, and then adjust it back to the valve hole. So you can see where the finger was touching before, and now there's about a 8mm gap between the rim and the metal finger. So that means we need to pull that rim towards the chain side, towards the right, by half of that distance, probably about 4mm. So I'll be using this spoke key to work my way round the rim and start working on that now, at the same time as also trying to get the wheel round, so no bumps. So it's all the same radius. So now we've trued it up and it's running pretty true now. So after you've trued it once, a good practice, and this is again from Sheldon Brown's method, is to to stress the spokes. And I usually use a wooden spoon handle when I'm doing this at the kitchen table, but because I'm in the workshop I've got a piece of wood. I'm going to put it between these two crossing spokes and just give them a twist. Now I started at the valve hole and I'm working around the wheel once. Now the purpose of this is to give the spokes an extra pull and bed them into the rim and into the flange of the hub, so that we get some of the stretching and bedding and the movement that's going to happen in the metal once the wheel's in use happens now, and then we can re-true the wheel and re-tension the spokes, and hopefully the wheel will stay true for longer and everything will be settled together. Still running pretty true. The tension, I think it could be I don't have a tension meter. I think a tension meter is probably a really good thing to have, but I've never used one. I think I might just go round and tighten all those spokes another quarter turn just to make them stronger, tighter. Okay, I've gone around and I've put another quarter turn on all the spokes, and I'm happy with the tension, and it's stayed true without any extra truing. Now the last thing we have to do on it is the rim tape. Now I use this Schwalbe rim tape. I buy the 19mm, I think it is, tape. It's just a really strong cloth tape with a good adhesive, but it's quite soft. I have done this with cutting down a roll of gaffer tape. That's Bush Mechanics for you, and that's worked fine, but this is better. Now again, you find your valve hole and you start there. It's really good to be doing this in the truing stand, and just roll the wheel away from me, keeping it tight, because you don't want it to go into those the spoke holes in the rim. The purpose of the rim tape is to protect the tube from the ends of the spokes and from the spoke holes in the rim. These double-walled rims, see this rim's double-walled, there's 2 layers of aluminium here. So you've got a hole in the top layer that the nipple's inside. A single-wall rim, the tape goes over the heads of the actual nipples and spokes and protects the tube from being pierced by them. So here I am overlapping and going across the valve hole. So the valve hole is just there. I'll cut the tape. And I'm going to find the valve hole here and cut out the hole, and there we've got it done. Now it's quite a good idea to get I'm just making sure that tape is well seated all the way around. It's a good idea to get a tyre and tube on the rims as soon after you put the rim tape on. And if you're not planning to put a tyre and tube on it straight away, don't put the rim tape on till later, because you'll often find that rim tape will pull past, the holes won't line up again anymore with the valve hole. You'll have to pull it back. And some rim tapes I've even had trouble with the adhesive going bad with time. So if we can get a tube and a tyre on that as soon as possible, that will make sure that rim tape gets properly stuck on and it doesn't give us any trouble. So now we've got our wheel. We've got to get the torque washers on both sides. It's going to be very easy to put the torque washer on that side. There'll be the nut going on top of that. On this side, again, it's the drive side, the chain side, the right side. The torque washer and the nut, each one of them will have to be threaded over these 3 phase wires and the 5 sensor wires, the hall sensor wires. And that's a bit of a nuisance, getting all those bits and pieces threaded on there, but you don't have to do it very often. And we'll spin on the cluster before we put on the torque washer and the nut too. So those things are coming next.